Picture this. It's 186 BCE. You're a Roman father. Your family is respected, wealthy, connected to all the right names. You've done everything a man like you is supposed to do. You've secured an excellent marriage for your daughter. She's 16, beautiful, educated, raised carefully to embody every Roman ideal of virtue, obedience, and silence. The wedding is perfect. The ceremony unfolds without flaw. The feast is lavish beyond question. Guests laugh. Wine flows freely. Music fills the air. Your daughter smiles, because that's what she's been taught to do. This is her role. This is her duty. And now she's being led away for the final ritual, the one no one ever talks about. She turns back just once. Her eyes meet yours. There's confusion there. Fear. A question she doesn't yet know how to ask. You look away, not because you don't love her, but because you know exactly what's about to happen, and you know you cannot stop it. This is the ritual Rome buried so deeply that historians are still piecing it together centuries later. What I'm about to tell you is not mythology. It's not rumor. It's documented practice. And it exposes a brutal intersection of religion, power, and systematic abuse that forces us to rethink what ancient Rome really was. Here's what we know for certain. Between roughly 300 BCE and 200 CE, Roman marriage law included a provision that appears again and again in legal texts, but is almost never explained. Later medieval writers would call it ius primi noctis. In Rome, it went by another name, ditus divorum, an offering to the gods. Now listen carefully to what Roman fathers never told their daughters. Marriage in Roman law was not a partnership. It was a transfer of ownership. A woman passed from the authority of her father to the authority of her husband. This transfer was called manus. But before that transfer could be completed, before a woman could legally become a wife, she had to be purified. That is the exact word used in the legal texts. Purifice, purified. Rome's foundational legal code, the 12 Tables, contains a brief but devastating clause. No bride of proper Roman family may enter marriage without purification by the appointed guardians of divine will. That's how the priests were described. Guardians of divine will. Specifically, the sacerdotes Bonae Diae, priests of the good goddess, a fertility cult woven deeply into the heart of Roman religious life. And this is where everything turns dark. Roman religion was transactional. You offered something to the gods, and the gods returned a favor. Grain for fertility, wine for victory, animals for protection. A clean, brutal exchange. But in the case of marriage, the offering wasn't livestock. It wasn't wine. It was the bride herself. Think about that. You're 16, maybe 17. You've been trained your entire life to obey. You know your duty. You know your place. But no one told you this part. No one explained that before you belong to your husband, you belong to the gods. And the gods demand proof. The law refuses to explain what that proof looks like. Archaeology does. Across Rome, beneath major temples, researchers have uncovered purpose-built underground chambers. These are not burial crypts. They aren't storage rooms. They are something else entirely. Stone beds carved directly from solid rock, channels etched into the floor for liquid drainage, doors engineered to lock only from the outside. In 2003, excavations beneath the Temple of Bona Dea on the Aventine Hill uncovered one of these chambers fully intact. And what archaeologists found inside changed everything. The walls weren't covered in prayers, not hymns, not invocations to the gods. They were covered in names, hundreds of names, all female, each name paired with a date. Those dates align precisely with known Roman wedding celebrations from the same periods. British archaeologist Catherine Johns spent 3 years documenting the inscriptions. Her 27-page report concluded, "These appear to be records of women who underwent a ritual process in this space. While the nature of the ritual is not explicitly described, contextual evidence strongly suggests a connection to marriage rites." That phrase, "not explicitly described," is academic language for something very specific. We know exactly what happened here. We just don't like saying it out loud. So I'll say it plainly. This was where priests claimed the right to consummate the marriage before the husband. The process followed a strict pattern. After the public ceremony, after the feast, after the laughter and the music faded, the bride was escorted to the temple, not by her husband. He wasn't allowed to accompany her. Instead, she was led by female attendants, older women, women who had already endured the same ritual. They took her down narrow stone stairs, away from torchlight and celebration, into cold corridors beneath the earth. The air was damp, the walls closed in. At the end of the passage stood a door. Behind it waited a priest, or several. The sources disagree on the number. Much of the written testimony survives only in fragments, because later generations worked very hard to destroy it. The playwright Plautus, writing around 205 BCE, referenced the practice in a comedy that was later heavily censored. Only pieces remain. In one surviving fragment, a character says, "The gods take their portion before any man. That is the law. It has always been the law." Another character asks, "And the bride, what does she receive?" The reply, "The blessing of purification, if she survives it." That line was removed in later copies. The philosopher Lucretius addressed the ritual even more directly in the 1st century BCE. Medieval monks attempted to erase the passage entirely. We only have it today because a single manuscript survived, rediscovered in 1417. Lucretius wrote, "The rites of Bona are called sacred, but they are terror. What the priest claims to offer the gods, he takes for himself, and the law shields this theft with the word divine." Read that again. The law shields this theft with the word divine. Now understand the machinery of this system. You are a Roman father. You know this ritual exists. You know your daughter will undergo it. But you cannot refuse. Because it isn't called violence, it's called religion. It isn't assault, it's purification. It isn't a crime, it's divine law. The system is perfectly insulated against resistance. The priests claim holiness. The law enforces silence. Society calls it tradition. And the girls disappear into chambers beneath the temples. What makes this practice so difficult to reconstruct isn't a lack of evidence. It's the silence that was engineered around it. Roman women who endured the ritual weren't merely discouraged from speaking, they were legally forbidden. In 169 BCE, the Lex Vaconia introduced strict provisions regarding religious secrecy. Any woman who revealed the mysteries of sacred rites could be charged with impietas. The penalties were severe: exile, loss of property, in some cases, death. This is why the historical record looks the way it does. The victims were silenced by law. The perpetrators cloaked their actions in holiness. And the men who wrote history were either participants in the system or beneficiaries of it. When later scholars complain that the sources are fragmentary, they're describing the result of a system designed to make speaking impossible. But power always misunderstands one thing about silence. Silence is not the same as forgetting. And when speech is forbidden, people find other ways to testify. In the 1920s, Archaeologists excavating a villa in Pompeii uncovered a room that stopped them cold. It wasn't sealed by volcanic ash. It had been deliberately walled shut before the eruption of Vesuvius. Someone had hidden it. Inside was a fresco. At first glance, it looked ordinary, a traditional Roman wedding scene, a bride and groom, guests gathered, ritual gestures frozen in paint. Everything appeared exactly as it should, until you noticed the background. There, almost invisible unless you knew where to look, a second scene unfolded. A woman was being led down a staircase by robed figures, her body twisted backward, her face turned toward a man standing above her. He reached for her, frozen in place, unable or unwilling to follow. The painter had given extraordinary attention to her expression, more care than the bride in the foreground, fear, confusion, betrayal. The archaeologist who documented the fresco wrote, "The technical precision of the hidden figure exceeds that of the central scene. The painter clearly intended the background image to be remembered. Someone painted that knowing they could never speak openly. Painting was safer than testimony. Hiding it was safer still." They sealed the room and trusted time to do what the law would not: preserve the truth. It worked. 2,000 years later, we're still looking at it. After the ritual, the bride was returned to her wedding celebration, sometimes hours later, sometimes not until the following day. Roman wedding customs include a detail that puzzled historians for centuries. The bride appeared before her husband, wearing a veil called a flammeum. Unlike other veils, this one was never removed, not during the ceremony, not during the consummation of the marriage. For a long time, scholars claimed this was about modesty, about Roman virtue, proper behavior. That explanation collapses when you read Roman medical texts from the same period. The physician Serranus, writing in the 2nd century CE, casually notes in a gynecological treatise that many brides showed signs of recent injury on their wedding night. He offers practical advice, then adds a remark that changes everything. The veil, he writes, serves a dual purpose. It preserves modesty and prevents the husband from observing evidence of the purification ritual, which might provoke inappropriate questions. Prevents the husband from observing evidence. Read that again. The veil was not about virtue. It was about concealment, about hiding injuries, about maintaining the fiction that the bride was untouched. The entire system depended on that lie. The bride could not speak. That was illegal. Physical evidence was hidden. That was custom. And if she showed fear, distress, or trauma, it was dismissed as nervousness. She was a virgin after all. Of course she was frightened. Every element worked together: law, religion, medicine, tradition, a perfect machinery of silence. And then, in 186 BCE, something broke. A woman named Hispala Phaecaenia went before the Roman consuls and revealed the inner workings of the Bacchanalia, secret religious rites that had been operating across Italy for decades. According to the historian Livy, her testimony described underground gatherings, sexual coercion, abuse carried out under priestly authority, and victims silenced by religious law. The Senate panicked. They launched a massive investigation. Priests were arrested, temples were closed. Leaders of the Bacchanalia were executed. Rome declared the rites a foreign corruption, an existential threat to moral order. But here's the detail most people miss. During that investigation, multiple women attempted to testify about the marriage purification ritual, about what happened beneath the temples of Bona Dea. The Senate refused to hear them. Livy records the consul Spurius Postumius stating, "The Bacchanalia are foreign perversions." The rites of Bona Dea are Roman tradition. We do not investigate tradition. That single sentence explains everything. Abuse survives by calling itself tradition, by claiming that age equals legitimacy, by insisting that if something has always been done, it must be sacred rather than criminal. Most of the women who tried to speak were threatened into silence, charged with impietas, warned of exile. But one woman refused. Her name was not recorded. She stood in the forum and described what had happened to her in the chamber beneath the temple. She named the ritual. She named the priests. She named the lie. She was arrested within hours, charged with impietas and public obscenity, exiled to Sicily, forbidden from returning to Rome, forbidden from speaking to Roman citizens. She disappears from the historical record at that point. But not everything vanished. In 1964, archaeologists discovered a piece of graffiti scratched into stone near the Roman Forum. It dates to roughly 180 BCE, 6 years after the Bacchanalia scandal. Written in rough Latin, it reads, "Tradition is what monsters call their crimes when no one stops them." Someone risked everything to carve that message into the heart of Roman power. Someone wanted the truth left behind, even if their name could not be, and Rome could not erase it completely. The ritual didn't end overnight. It adapted. By the 1st century BCE, elite families began finding ways around it. Instead of subjecting their daughters to the chamber, they paid enormous bribes for what priests called symbolic purification. A ceremony without the underground room, without the assault. Religion, they argued, performed correctly, just differently. The priests accepted the bribes. Of course they did. Because it was never really about the gods. It was about access, about power. Once wealth could purchase exemption, the ritual revealed itself for what it truly was. A system designed to grant powerful men sanctioned access to vulnerable women, protected by law and ritual language. By the start of the Common Era, the practice had largely disappeared among Rome's elite. But it continued among the lower classes for another century. Poor families couldn't afford bribes. The poet Juvenal, writing around 100 CE, notes this bitterly. The poor still offer their daughters to the old gods. The rich offer gold instead. Even the gods prefer money to virtue. The practice didn't end because Rome found it immoral. It ended because wealthy men decided they didn't want it happening to their own daughters. As long as it happened to someone else's children, it was tradition. When it threatened theirs, it became negotiable. That tells you exactly who the system was designed to protect. For centuries, classical scholars minimized these accounts or dismissed them outright. They described the evidence as too fragmented, the sources too unreliable, the testimonies too emotional. They suggested exaggeration, misinterpretation, anything except confronting what the material actually showed. Because acknowledging this ritual forces an uncomfortable truth into the open. It means admitting that Rome, the foundation of Western law, the template for civilization, embedded systematic sexual abuse into its most sacred legal processes. It means recognizing that Roman marriage was not a private family arrangement or a union between equals. It was a transaction in which state-sanctioned violence was a prerequisite. That realization threatens the story Rome told about itself, and the story later civilizations inherited without asking too many questions. So historians looked away, but in the last 2 decades, that has become harder to justify. New archaeological discoveries, better dating methods, feminist and trauma-informed analysis of ancient texts. When you put it all together, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The chambers are real. The inscriptions are real. The legal language is real. The women's names carved into stone are real. In 2018, a research team affiliated with the American Academy in Rome published the most comprehensive study ever conducted on the Ditus Devorum ritual. They analyzed legal codes, architectural evidence, literary fragments, medical writings, and epigraphic records. Their conclusion was carefully worded, but devastating. The available evidence strongly suggests that premarital religious purification rituals in Roman culture included sexual assault of brides by religious authorities, systematized through legal, social, and religious structures that eliminated the possibility of